Welcome to Scary Thoughts, Horror, Philosophy, Culture. I'm Marc Kate.
And I'm Chad Lott.
This is episode 117. We're going to be talking about Fallout, the Amazon Prime series, season 1 from 2024. You can email us at whattthe, W-H-A-T-T-H-E, at scarythoughts.org. And I have nothing to plug, do you?
Negative.
Okay, spoilers ahead. That was an easy intro.
Yep.
So where do you want to start?
Well, I love the Fallout games. I've only played like one or two of the earlier ones, and I don't regularly play video games, but I love the world of it. I've always liked the artwork, and then even though I don't play the sequels, I've always kind of like kept up on them because I just think the storyline and stuff is kind of fun. And then I think this is one of the more successful video game adaptations.
Yeah, everybody keeps talking about that. And pointing to the legacy of terrible video game adaptations.
I mean, there's some real steamers out there. I mean, probably, what do you think the worst one is?
I probably wouldn't even necessarily know because I don't play games. I'm not invested in adaptations and then watching them just on principle. I don't know. Probably one of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I saw one of them a long time ago, and it was
man. That's
oh my
not
God.
a video game, bro.
I may or may not edit that out. Well,
I think the worst one is the Super Mario Brothers one with
oh God,
like the one
Bob Hoskins.
Bob Hoskins, who's phenomenal in pretty much everything except for this. Although I wonder if I went back and watched it, if I would find things I liked about it. I mean, it's got that Dennis Hopper as the villain.
Right.
So
I don't know. I think that movie is in the how did this get made territory. Like it's sort of revered for how terrible it is.
Yeah. I mean, one of the big differences though between games of that time and games now is like the narrative possibilities of video games are so enormous.
Yeah.
So you have real lore, real storylines, really good characters, like really emotional scenes that used to, before it's just like Pong or whatever. Right. Now it's like you have, it's interesting, these new shows, like I think the most closely aligned to Fallout is The Last of Us, which is also a prestige post-apocalyptic video game series. Yeah, I think it's great. I thought that show was really fun for genre stuff, for like sci-fi, horror type stuff. And then there's like actually like quite a bit in horror. Like the Resident Evil series is a video game thing.
They're fine.
They're okay. I mean, I think there's definitely a certain pleasure to like if you played the games and then went and watch the show. And then that seems to be about 50-50. Some people like really fucking hate the adaptations and some people really love them.
Yeah. Pardon the clackety clack. I'm just going to look up what has been adapted.
I mean, there's like all kinds like Battleship.
Oh, Silent Hill was fine. Battleship blows my mind. I never saw it, but
I watched for some reason it just came up on my YouTube feed, but I watched a battle scene from Battleship. Holy shit, is it stupid?
Of course it is.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing a lot of Warcraft. Tetris, never saw that one. Yeah. No. Ready Player One was fucking despicable. I know it's based on a book, but I think it's in the same conversation. Oh, Tomb Raider. That was okay.
Yeah, I mean that's like of an era when like it's like the action, it's like very much more action focused. Like I don't think there's like a whole lot. I mean, there's some Tomb Raider lore or whatever.
The last Mortal Kombat movie was not awful. I don't remember what it was called. I just know that I watched it.
It's Mortal Kombat: The Kickening.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, it's funny. I'm looking at this list of cinema adaptations of video games, and I don't recognize any of it. Biohazard Vendetta. What even is that?
Oh, dude, the Christopher Lambert as Raiden in the previous Mortal Kombat outings, is just like wonderfully stupid. Because after Highlander, he never really like got his due. I don't think, even though he was sort of like a real deal French actor before that. But like Christopher Lambert playing a Japanese lightning god.
That's great.
Incredible.
Well, oh, Jean-Claude Van Damme. That's right. He was in Street Fighter. Okay. Anyway, this is boring. I guess it is kind of peculiar that given that we're decades into Hollywood has no new ideas and they're just capitalizing on already existing properties and content. And it has taken a really long time to get much of a breakout adaptation of a video game. They're few and far between. The ones that aren't legitimately terrible is a short list.
It seems like the series helps a little bit, like being able to have 8 episodes to walk out a little bit. Because Fallout is so jam-packed with lore. It's like, where would you even start? Like, even within the game, like there's kind of big choose your own adventure moments where you're like, okay, am I going to join the Brotherhood or am I going to be a part of the New California Republic? Or you make these decisions, and then to just even barely explain. And I think the show does a really good job of just letting stuff hang. Like they don't go too deep into like, this is power armor. Like they just assume that you kind of know what it is. And I actually know one of the guys that made that power armor for the show. This dude that used to be a sign maker at Whole Foods Market. He had such a come up. This guy Kerry Lee, he was just like a cosplay dude. You know what I mean? And then when Whole Foods fired everybody cool, he went scattered into the wind with it like the rest of the artists, but he came out and started making props and shit for movies. And that's how I pictured him standing next to that armor suit. And he's like, hey, look what I made, or whatever. Really cool.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something I appreciated about this series is I knew less than nothing about Fallout, and I was super into it, really enjoyed it, didn't feel like I was missing anything. And then afterwards had done some reading, watched a couple of YouTube videos about it and its background. And like, it's as complex as Game of Thrones. There's so much backstory and depth behind all of it. And I didn't feel like I had to know any of that to enjoy the series. But it's so cool that it exists in such a rich world, and that I dig that it's canon too, right?
Yeah. I love the look of it. Like, because it combines a lot of stuff that I'm really, really fond of. Like, I obviously love nuclear wastelands, Westerns, obviously, and then 50s and 60s Hollywood, mid-century Americana stuff. I love. And so this, especially the show has like, in some ways, it's like a sci-fi version of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Like, because it's, it switches between a Western mode and then late 60s Hollywood. And then it's interesting for like an alternative history take is what's different about this, like what sent our world and this world in opposite directions kind of is they don't really develop the personal computer, and they do not have a 60s revolutionary culture. Like it just never happens. Like there aren't hippies in this world. So it kind of stays on this David Lynch, like square suit.
Although Vault 23 seems to practice free love.
Well, I mean, it's kind of dark though, because
it's an experiment.
Yeah. Like, well, they're trying to just keep a diverse population. So when they thaw people out, they can like breed into that pool.
Yeah.
But it's kind of one of the fun things about the lore is that it's not like there's just a bunch of vaults. Every single vault is running some totally bananas experiment.
Yeah.
Which is kind of how I wish America was like, because we just had this 2-party system where it's like you're really just getting a left or a right shade wherever it is. But I would like to see like, why not let Seattle become the full-on Chaz total autonomous zone and just see what fucking happens? Like have the whole state.
I think that America is kind of running that software to a large degree.
I think it's a lot more homogenous.
To a large degree. I mean, we were just talking about Oakland before we started rolling. Oakland just runs according to an entirely different set of rules than Connecticut or Florida or Texas, right? Like there's definitely a lot of ideological overlap, but in so many senses, the silo effect that people have been complaining about is pretty real.
Yeah, but ultimately you're just getting an expression of like failed progressive policies or overreaching Christian right philosophies dialed up depending on like how weighted the population is, pretty much.
Sure, but in a sense you could think of those as two vaults without doors. The doors are in their minds.
I mean, it's not like there's like a Hobbit Shire full of gardening polyamorists and of a state. Look what happens. Anytime, some weird Hollywood sex cult gets a little too out of line, it gets smashed down. Anytime somebody gets a little too Ruby Ridge, the feds come in,
100%. But I think what I'm getting at is that things don't necessarily get that extreme in other cultures around the world. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but America is willing to turn a blind eye. Imagine any of these things existing in other cultures. We tend to think of America as like it's so conformist. It's one of the least conformist cultures on planet Earth, right? There's so much diversity here in every direction. And part of that is this sort of like the libertarian bent of like, you go pray to your God over there. I'm going to just be over here praying to my God and just, we'll trade chickens for sheep once a year and we're good, right? No?
I mean, I think that there's way too much of like basically like capitalist mycelium connecting everything. I think I think it's very like you're not getting really. I mean, it kind of is like Fukuyama end of history shit. Like it is like Planet Starbucks, and that force I think is like stripping away all of these like weirder culture possibilities. Like
I totally agree, but I think the degree to which that's not happening is what's impressive.
Yeah, I mean, you can get into some weird shit for sure.
Yep.
If you want to. I do love the idea of like how radically different the vaults are. Like in the full lore. Like there's like mutants in one and another one is like I also love the thing that they're all supposed to be waiting out to come up to the surface and do the good stuff but it's already happened.
Yeah.
Like there's already mutants on the surface that seem to be living a Western fantasy.
Yeah. So in your estimation, I know that this is a sort of obvious question, but are the dwellers of Vault 23 living in a paradise, or do you think it's a sort of like...
You mean Vault 33, the one that Lucy's from?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was 23. Yes, 33. I'm sorry.
Are they living in a paradise?
Like Lucy comes to the surface with the golden rule and all this optimism, and in one sense, she's totally foolish, but it is also what helps her persevere in this nightmare escape. And so I think that reflects on her background, right? Mm-hmm. Was she living this lie that didn't sober her up to the reality of the world? Or was she living in a paradise and that lack of trauma, that lack of horror and struggle actually allowed her to develop a moral compass that can even serve her in an apocalyptic wasteland?
Yeah, I mean, she's really running like the go-getter America 1950s code.
It's great.
Yeah, and I really like how they do the character montage of her in the beginning. It reminds me a little bit of like how Wes Anderson does it a little bit. Like it's just 2 seconds. It really reminded me. Her introduction reminds me of Max's introduction in Rushmore, where it just shows you like 2-second clips of him in all of his clubs.
Right.
And you sort of like, it's just a fun way to do it, exposition. And then, it makes her seem more like she actually, there's like end story justification for her having all those skills that she displays later on in the show. But I don't know, like, is her life a fantasy or not?
Well, it's literally a fantasy, but also it's sort of like the argument, like humanity against nature. It's like, well, humanity is part of nature, so there's no outside of nature. Mm-hmm. You can argue that she's living in a fantasy, but then everybody is, so she's part of the world, even if it's cordoned off.
Yeah, but I mean, although part of me thinks that like the world of the wasteland is like more of like the world as it is, kind of, like things will kill you there. It is super dangerous, and there doesn't seem to be any sort of like ideology, unless like cowboy fuck you ideology is one, like there's no code of the West in the wasteland. Like everybody seems to be out to do each other as horribly dirty as possible. I don't know. The vault dwellers, I kind of think of them as like Mormons. Like they might believe in something very strange, but their children seem to be very capable. So
yeah,
probably that is where I would land on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this definitely is an interesting spin for me because, as we've discussed with The Road and about Walking Dead, we've never actually covered Walking Dead, have we? No, but it comes up now and again that a thing I really dislike, not about those things as art, but rather the truth of the world that they're articulating, is that everybody is evil, that when shit gets strained and difficult, nobody's to be trusted to the nth except the protagonist. The Walking Dead walks that out constantly. There's only a couple of cool people at the center and everybody else is pure evil. The Road definitely reflects that. And this show reflects that too, except for Lucy, basically, in the majority of the characters, her and the people she comes from. Maximus, we don't really know what his agenda is yet. We don't even really know his backstory. We know that he came out of a fridge and he wants revenge on the people who did that to him, but we don't know who he means, who he thinks did that to him. Maybe it's the Brotherhood. We don't know what his thing is. What's her name? The woman the evil woman who then
Moldavo or Moldano or something.
Yeah, she's a pretty troublesome character. We really don't know what her intentions are really. Anyway, it just seems like as they're walking through the wasteland, everybody's out to fuck you. But laid on top of that is this like wide-eyed 50s Americana character just sort of stumbling her way through.
Yeah.
Due to her grit and perseverance.
I mean, she's a total fish out of water character. It also kind of reminds me of the girl in True Grit a little bit.
Sure.
Another amazing Western. I think the show really does like kind of keep to video game logic in the way that, like some movies keep to cartoon logic a little bit. Like the show really does show like, oh, you're injured? Stim pack. Zoop. And then a lot of the characters they run into, it really is episodic like a game. Like they are functionally just NPCs. Like there's just like these fun little moments like that happen, and they're, I think, asking like this show to have like a world that comports to any sort of like normal moral rules, probably not the show for that, which is great. That's one of the things that's so enjoyable about it, is it does feel like you're just passively watching a video game.
Yeah. But if it's okay if we dig into the post-apocalyptic morality a little more, I'm curious, you definitely know a lot more about the Old West and American history and the cowboy genre in general than I. And I definitely think of, let's say, The Walking Dead as a variation on a Western. This certainly is. The Road, it's not much of a Western, but it does make me think of the way Cormac McCarthy frames the Old West as an apocalyptic wasteland where everybody's out to fuck you. But so much of our history, at least in cinema, of cowboy movies, of Westerns, there is a moral high ground, that there is justice and a code. And I'm curious if, I mean, this is a really ignorant question, but like, did Cormac McCarthy invent the nihilist Western, or was that way already established?
I mean, you could make an argument for like the spaghetti Westerns being where that comes from. I mean,
really?
Even then, like the spaghetti Westerns are like this is how I would say it, is where like an anti-hero becomes really like a a well-known thing, like Fistful of Dollars and all that stuff, where you have like a character with a dark past or whatever. But I mean, I'm trying to think if there's like an earlier pre-Cormac McCarthy gritty Western of note. I mean, there must be.
Yeah. I'm just curious about how much Cormac McCarthy has influenced our ideas about the wasteland, and in particular, the American wasteland, that we have numerous iterations of. The post-apocalypse is going to be like America was 150, 200 years ago or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, for Westerns, one of the things that's unique about it and different than Apocalypse is we have like extant writing of the time. So one thing I was thinking about was like, okay, Samuel Chamberlain's My Confession, which is what Blood Meridian's based on, exists and was written in its time, and it's dark and fucked up as any modern Western would be. So you have like the actual, like it's not so far in the past that people don't know what happened, you know, and it was violent and it was super fucked up. And there's all this, you know, there's like genocidal Indian wars and things like that. It definitely did get pretty crispy. I don't know. I keep thinking about like how you asked that question. I'm trying to think when it got dark and when it made that turn. There wasn't like I'm trying to think if there's like The Watchmen, like everything after The Watchmen, superheroes are dark and gritty, or like The Dark Knight, it comes out the same year. So both of those comics sort of went in that direction.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know.
Fallout just got me thinking about that because it's sort of both. It's the apocalyptic wasteland where everybody wants to murder you for no reason or weird reasons, but there's also the moral code. But then also it is smashed with all these out of space, out of time elements that I think are really fun.
Yeah, those elements are, I think, what make the show. I feel like one bummer is like I think they should have just let the ghoul be like an evil character. I mean, I know we're only one season in, but it certainly feels like he's like on a redemption arc kind of, which is lame.
Yeah.
Like you could, like the ghoul could be a legitimately scary character, like a Stringer Bell or something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe Walton Goggins is just too likable for that. I mean, he's phenomenal. I like him much better as like Cooper in the 50s than I do as the ghoul.
Although he's so good as Cooper.
Yeah.
That's such a good character.
Yeah.
No question.
Like I could watch like the spinoff of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood with him in it, you know, with Tarantino directing or whatever, because he did such a great job in The Hateful Eight with like Tarantino directing. He's one of my absolute favorite actors. I've been a fan for years.
Yeah. You watched The Shield, obviously, right?
It's been so long since I've seen it, but yeah, like, I mean, I watched an interview with him when they were talking about like, well, why have you done so many like Westerns and cop movies? He's like, I'd love to do something else. He's like, but I love this stuff and they keep casting me in it. So awesome. He just has like that, like classic, almost 50s character actor kind of like just happy for the work, you know, kind of deal.
Yeah.
But have you seen him in Sons of Anarchy as like the trans love interest?
No. What season? I think I only watched 2 seasons.
It's like later seasons.
Okay.
I'm agnostic on if it was, you know, handled well for the culture or whatever. I don't know. But he definitely sold it, you know.
Oh, wow.
He went for it.
Yeah, yeah. It's cool you've brought up Tarantino a couple of times because I think that obviously what I'm about to say would apply to the video game, not the show, but it's definitely magnified in the show, is the sort of the tonal eclecticism really feels like sort of it reminds me of Philip K. Dick for sure. It's like 3 genres in one, and it's also a comedy, and it's super fucking dark and tragic, like all of it. But also the way Tarantino does that sort of thing. It's sort of surreal. It's sort of campy. It's sort of brutal action. It's got all of these things in a fairly exaggerated form.
I think you're describing a little bit of what I think of as the tone of Amazon originals. Like if you think about Invincible, that cartoon is pretty wide. There's just like and if you think about that statement, what I said, and then when you think about like the tone of Netflix as a studio, there's like just sort of like a zany mayhem. The Boys, Reacher to a certain extent.
I love Reacher.
Yeah, me too. It's so stupid. It's such a, but there's like a lot of graphic mayhem that happens in that show that is like comedic.
True.
Like there's like I don't know. It's almost like Amazon has like a 13-year-old boy in charge, and Netflix has like a earnest 14-year-old girl in charge.
Wow. I'm trying to argue against it, and I don't think I would succeed.
I know there's like tons of stuff. Like there's probably counter examples for both or whatever. But when I think of Amazon originals, I don't want to say they're like right wing or anything, but you know, there's a couple Tom Clancy shows. It feels like there's like 40 Navy SEAL shows on Amazon Prime.
Oh, Jack Ryan is Amazon. Yeah.
Yeah. Jack Ryan's Amazon. The Terminal List. That's another one.
Yeah.
There's a lot of GWAT happening, you know?
Yeah.
Do you think that the Fallout, the show, switches tone? I mean, it goes from like that Western mode to like whatever the wasteland is.
Somehow I feel like it works because the wasteland is enough cartoonish. Mm-hmm. And then the 50s stuff is just got that hint of sinister behind it somehow.
I think those things too, like Hollywood, apocalypse, it just seems to be something that just naturally emerges a little bit. Like, I mean, Firefly is a little bit like that.
Oh,
it's like a space Western, like a sci-fi Western. It's interesting to me also to see like the reviews of the show, like a lot of the like that guy, the critical drinker, who's sort of like the top of the neckbeard He-Man woman hater film critics. He talked about like how much more enjoyable the show was than he thought. And it seems like Lucy is the kind of female lead character that like dudes that collect Funko Pops like, but at the same time, dudes that are like willing to like hate all over like the Star Wars franchises and Kathleen Kennedy's atrocities.
Well, she's not a Mary Sue.
Not a Mary Sue, yeah.
Which to me is fucking everything.
And it's funny how like, just from a writing standpoint or like a craft standpoint, the Mary Sue-ness is just completely handled by the character montage.
Right.
There's so much like really good exposition in that. She's explaining like the world of the vaults. She's explaining like how the marriage stuff happens. She's explaining like this zany morality. Like, so it's like, yes, she does the right thing in an almost Lisa Simpson-y kind of way, but she's also like a hornball who's like screwing around with her cousins and stuff. So like, I think the show is fun for all those reasons. Like, it's just such a wacky mix of just weird shit.
Yeah. What's your draw to Westerns, if you could sum it up? Is it obvious, or is it just you like what you like?
I think as an American, you're sort of like programmed by culture to like certain things. And I certainly grew up watching a lot of like Nick at Night and Turner Network shit and Grand Ole Opry Country Network stuff with my grandmother. So I grew up with it is one thing I would say. But I also like it as America's founding myth. Like in a, in the way that you like might like Indian god stuff or whatever. I think I've always liked it. I love cowboy guns and like the weapons of the West. I've always really liked, just like the whole thing.
Yeah. As someone raised in Canada, I really don't have that mythology.
I mean, my dad was really into Westerns and I watched a lot of the classic Westerns with him growing up. I mean, I've probably seen easily 100 Western films, like probably more.
I've probably seen 20.
Yeah.
Like none.
I also like Westerns is like a mode, like in the way like actors would do Shakespeare or whatever. Like it's interesting to see like, and then Hollywood has had Western shit laying around for all of its existence. So it really does a good job of, like even a really low budget Western will still look like a pretty good Western. Like that shitty Western that the Daily Wire made with Gina Carano.
Don't know.
So Gina Carano, the UFC fighter, after she got kicked off the Star Wars Disney thing, the right-wing news outlet, the Daily Wire, were like, we'll make a movie with you. And, and they kind of gave her the option of like, do you want to do a union shoot or not a union shoot? And it was during COVID. So there was going to be like implications. And so they went with like the lower budget non-union shoot, which was the Western. And it's not terrible because no Western, it's kind of like Westerns are kind of like pizza. Like they're mostly like, all right. Like, I mean, even like the shitty remake of the Magnificent Seven is like, has some scenes. I mean, of course, Young Guns, you know, a classic.
God,
Tombstone.
I haven't seen Young Guns since it was in the theater.
It's absurd, man. I mean, there's just so many like good westerns that have really good moments. And even newer stuff like Bone Tomahawk is a pretty decent horror movie. It's all right. Kurt Russell's great.
Kurt Russell's great.
The rest of it does get a little bit shaky.
Yeah. New Beyonce album.
I hate it. I think it's trash of an album. I know it's very controversial. I would say, just to be clear here, anybody can make whatever kind of music they want.
Yep.
It feels like there's a lot of like concept country music that kind of came out in the last few years, like Sturgill Simpson's Sailor's Guide to Earth, which has like, it's this country album that has like big late era Elvis songs and then bluegrass
covers, you mean, or style?
Just style. And then literally a Nirvana cover right in the middle of it. So it's this very like interestingly produced album from a real deal country western star. This is like, I think Beyonce could have done a better country album than this. It just feels super produced. It's like it was designed for TikTok reels, like the whole thing.
Wow. And
then it's like, it has like all the features on it are so conspicuous. Like, of course you got Willie Nelson. Of course you got Dolly Parton. Like, I mean, then she has some sort of black country singer. I can't remember her name. I should remember it, but also featuring. And that makes that also like kind of like a choice that you would make if you're trying to create like a really tight artifact. I don't know. I just like outlaw country shit and early Grand Ole Opry stuff, which is like rougher than this.
And reruns of Hee Haw.
Yeah, I loved that shit when I was a little kid. But then, you know, like that era, that 80s and 90s country era was criticized for being overproduced. So I don't know. I guess I can't hate it too much.
Well, what I hear you speaking to is two things. You're speaking to the thing and you're speaking to the thing of the thing.
Yeah.
So there's the music and then there's the, like, even when we say that something's overproduced, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're sort of talking about, well, I don't like the sound of it, but we're also talking about, well, there was an intention here I don't trust.
That I definitely don't trust the intention of it for sure. But I also don't like the Stagecoach Festival style country music either, like all that Florida, Georgia line bullshit.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's country music, but it has like pop beats. So it's the same 4/4, like it like you feel like anybody could have produced it. Any of these like big hit maker, like Britney Spears producer type dudes could have made these albums. Simultaneously with country, there's like so much interesting shit going on, isn't this? Like you have Billy Strings, who is fucking amazing. He's this bluegrass player. Or like Sierra Farrell, who I know your bandmate Andy quite digs. She's got like a face tattoo. We've talked about her on the show before.
Oh God,
yeah,
I've already forgotten.
Yeah. And there's this show called Western AF that has like all these like sort of new school roots people. I mean, so country is huge, and it feels like the Beyonce country album was made because country's huge again. I don't know. But who cares? Who gives a shit what I think about Beyonce's country album?
I asked.
Yeah, you asked. I purposely not talked about this with anybody.
Yeah, I didn't really even know about it until 2 days ago.
Yeah. And then like you have Taylor Swift's new album, which sounds like very indebted to Lana Del Rey is what I would say.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's gorgeous.
Yeah. Man, Lana Del Rey fucking rules. I'm a huge fan of her stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But again, there's like a westernness to some of her stuff.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Like she's out there like working at a Waffle House just for no fucking reason. Like I haven't even heard any explanations of it. Like it seems to be unconnected to anything, which I kind of like.
Fallout.
We were talking about like whether this was horror even adjacent.
Right. And it does in some ways feel like a horror comedy.
I mean, there's ghouls, so they're kind of like zombies.
Yeah.
There's monsters.
Definitely.
There's body horror.
Yeah. The fingers in the salamander were really upsetting to me. There's something deeply upsetting about that.
Yeah, it's pretty. That creature is. I think the creature designs are great, and I think this has more to do with Bethesda than Amazon. But Bethesda is the game company. If you're not that much of a nerd, but I think like just the props look great. Like the little pip, like the device that everybody has on their arm.
Yeah,
that seems like crazy that sort of thing would exist. But it's like the Predators thing is what it makes me think of.
Yeah,
I love the green analog, like typeface and all that stuff. I think is really cool. I like that the guns cause everyone to explode. Like there's like only extreme graphic violence.
Isn't the first shot fired in the series? It's definitely at the beginning is with this gun. I have no idea what I'm talking about, by the way. There's a gun in that world that just shoots whatever you stick in it. And someone... no, I think it's in the first episode. There's like a Latino guy. He's got a poncho on and you hear a gunshot and he looks down and there's a baby leg sticking out of his stomach. That's beautiful.
Yeah, or like later in the show, like Maximus gets shot with a fucking rotten tooth.
Yes.
It's so gross and funny.
Yeah.
And then there's like the thing of like the bottle caps being the currency is pretty funny. I love that they just don't explain it. They don't like try to... This doesn't waste any time justifying anything to the audience. It's just simply like presenting it to you for the same level of enjoyment that a fan of the game would have.
And half the time it's funny because it's weird, you know?
You know, I think it does have some pretty like legit like capitalism critiques. Like, I mean, the Nukem Cola company is like doing
Gavin
evil.
Newsom.
Yeah, it's just doing evil shit all the time. And there's definitely like the morality of like the company man.
Yeah.
But other than that, it doesn't really traffic with any of the modern witchcraft at all.
There's a non-binary character.
Yeah, but there's just non-binary people. It's not like
no,
it's not like
pronouns as such.
Really?
Yes.
Did I miss the win?
Yeah, the character who slices up their foot intentionally with their boot is they them.
Huh.
Yeah. The leader of the Brotherhood refers to them.
The themhood.
The themhood. Oh, it's nice.
Yeah.
That's really poetic.
Well, another thing that the show does with Lucy is something is kind of what they do with Ash and Evil Dead is squeaky clean in the beginning, completely fucked up by the end.
Yeah.
Like just not even wearing the same boot.
Right.
It's just like there's so, and that's kind of like a thing in Westerns. Like there's more than one Western where somebody loses their shoe and it's a thing. I liked the cutting off of the fingers and sewing them back on.
Yeah.
I thought was goofy as fuck, but also sort of like, you know, it's cartoonish, you know, it's like Roger Rabbit rules. Like, yeah, you can sew a finger back on in this world.
Yes.
And it's fine.
That just opens up so many possibilities for gags and plot. And also when Fast and Furious resurrects characters, it's fucking preposterous. But in this world, like, yeah, you can just sew a dead person's finger onto your hand.
Yeah.
It works great.
And then like the cryo thing sort of like unlocks this like slippery timeline where you can have characters moving back and forth and you can have just it just for something that's based on a game which has rules, there's like not as many rules in the storytelling, which is really fun.
Right.
There's probably Fallout novelizations.
Oh, I don't know.
It makes me think there's like 75 Warhammer novels just based on that's
really.
Yeah, I think that is coming out on Amazon too.
Warhammer?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, they're doing like Henry Cavill, who is a Warhammer 40K nerd. He plays
that?
Superman. He was the last Superman.
Oh, in the DC.
Yeah, he's also Witcher.
Oh,
which
yeah.
I've never seen.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he's like a super fan of the Warhammer 40K game. He like paints miniatures and shit, which I don't know that I totally believe that, but he seems to be really into it. And this is like his passion project is playing this one character. I don't know how they're going to do that show. I mean, it seems like it would be absurdly expensive to make that show and do it well. But that's like a show that has a huge fan base and like an infinite amount of lore, like 40 years. Well, not 40, but like 30 years worth of like lore.
I would think it would have to compete pretty seriously with what was accomplished with Game of Thrones. And I question if any streaming service, even one with as robust a potential backing as Amazon, has the budget to meet it. I think the refrain that we're on the other side of the hill of prestige television seems to be true. And I'd imagine, as we've seen budgets being slashed, I can't imagine Warhammer would be some sort of anomaly where it was able to compete with the budget of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I don't know.
Not that it's all about budget, but it sure matters when you're building an entire world, you know?
Yeah. Oh, there's a couple Warhammer 40K fan films that are really good.
Cool.
There's one called Astartes, which is once you start getting like Tyranids and shit, like their version of like the Xenomorph, like I think it would probably fall apart. But that basic Space Marine shape seems to be pretty CGI-able.
Yeah.
Do you have any familiarity with that? Like, do you
Warhammer?
Yeah. Are you
Zero?
Interesting. It's weird to see.
I just know that there's a number after it, but I don't know what the number is or means.
I mean, it's basically like originally a board game, pretty much like a miniature.
Sort of an RPG?
Yeah. No, and not even. It's like a miniature wargaming thing.
Like Risk? But more elaborate?
Kind of. Yeah. Like closer to
like
Risk.
Pokemon plus Risk?
Closer to Risk than Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
Yeah. Like you would like paint up your miniature army, and I would paint up a miniature army, and we put them on like a pretty detailed board, and there's like rolling dice to see what happens. I mean, it's fucking involved. And like everything else, like the level of it has become extreme. Like the painting that's done now is like, you know, it's like skateboarding now versus skateboarding in the 80s. It's like a totally different thing.
Right.
You'll see though, like there's a lot of like Warhammer 40K stuff that's creeped into memes, especially like Trump and Alex Jones memes. Like there'll be just like videos where Alex Jones's head is like superimposed on a Space Marine's body. And in the world of 40K, the Space Marines all work for like an Imperium. And there's like xenomorphs or like aliens. And so there's like Alex Jones just yelling about trannies or whatever is like turned into this 40K meme that kind of like you would have to know so much deep nerd shit to get it. I can't believe that like humor is that specific.
Yeah, I'm very lost.
Yeah, like basically like a board game meme that references like transgender politics and Alex Jones. I mean, like who is that for?
Well,
like
you know about
but like how many like why does it have 1,000 likes or whatever?
Oh, the world is so ugly. That's why.
Yeah. Or beautiful. I don't know. I mean, I've lately come around to just really enjoying seeing the balkanized freakiness of this world.
Oh, God. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not bothered by any of it. I think it's great.
I'm not on board.
I feel like the world is just going to be like the only people that are left are going to be like people cosplaying The Dirty Dozen and people cosplaying Revenge of the Nerds. Like that's the whole country.
That's fair. I don't know. It's very troubling to me that, you know, I feel very grateful I was alive in the 90s, but if that was peak, that's very sad.
I don't know. That shit was awesome.
It's sad that it can't.
Oh, that it can't go back. I thought you meant like that was like, oh, it's sad that was the height. I was like, yeah, it's pretty good. Pretty solid. I've been thinking about that movie Don't Look Up.
Yeah.
Which is a movie that we like roasted and hated on when we watched
really
it. But
hard.
I kind of saw it again and
you sat through that again?
I mean,
what an odd choice.
Yeah, I was super stoned watching it and I liked it so much more the second time I saw it. It was just, I don't know why, but like almost to the level of like Suspiria. Like when I watched the Suspiria remake again, I was like, man, I was completely wrong about this movie. I mean, there's definitely a lot to hate about it from like the messaging. You know, you definitely like it is a hardcore propaganda piece for the blue hairs.
Yeah.
But it has some really good comedic performances. But the thing at the very end, there's like a line that I think Leonardo DiCaprio says when he's like, "We had it so good," and then the world blows up. And like I've been thinking of that. I'm like this could be pretty fucking awesome. It's already mostly awesome. Like hot water comes out of most people. Everybody listening to this can go get hot water in their house right now.
It's a fucking miracle.
Yeah. You can shit and then it disappears from your house, you know, with a flush. Like that's not what most people experience in the world.
I was just talking to my father about, he has a friend who is about his age, you know, grew up in Iran, and they're talking about what happened there. And Iran, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with what Iran was in the 70s.
It used to be awesome.
It was pretty fucking cool. And this guy's assessment was like, we had it too good. We had it so good. We just took it for granted and got greedy and complacent. Mm-hmm. And it just seemed to be sort of like, you know, felt familiar.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get some sort of terrible shit here. But again, America's so big. It's like, I mean, Iran's small. Of course, you can take over a little country. Yeah. You know, like, I mean, it's actually kind of a big country, but, you know, it's not as big as Texas, fuckers. but like, yeah, like America's so big. It's, I could see, you know, like whatever's going on in Florida. I mean, this is different to what I said in the early part of the episode where I was saying, oh, it's mostly homogenized, but there is something to be said for like scale and space. Like when you get off the internet, things definitely get like a little bit more specific to where you're at.
Yes.
Yeah. I just think about the difference between walking my dog where I live now versus my previous neighborhood. And it's only like a 12-mile difference.
Yeah. Maybe explain that.
Oh yeah. I lived in West Oakland where walking my dog sucked. And now I live in Richmond, California, where, or at least the side I'm on is like this beautiful little mid-century suburb. You've been there.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. It's we go walk for like miles every day in this park that's just next to our house.
Fuck.
And it's like full of wildlife. It's so like I see rad shit every single time I get there. Saw a snake today. When's the last time you've seen a snake?
Forever.
I mean, like what did we say? We said how great Walton Goggins is. Yeah. We talked about that. Lucy, total cutie.
She's great.
Yeah. English in real life. Always. I thought it was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Always, all these, they took our jobs.
Kyle MacLaughlin murders someone by shoving their face in a pickle barrel and drowning them. That's one of my favorite things I've seen in quite a while.
Yeah. And he really sells like the Lynchian Americana.
Yeah.
Like I wonder how like great intentional choice. That it of a choice that was. Like it must be, right? Like you're like, hey, he represents this.
Yeah.
I've been rewatching Twin Peaks recently, and you're like,
it's kind of tough.
Really? I've enjoyed every second of it so far. It doesn't feel dated. It's just its own thing in its own weird way.
Yeah.
I think some of the performances are definitely like what the fuck am I watching? It feels weird to like a modern eye kind of, but the Badalamenti score is so good. Like, I mean, it really is phenomenal. And then the clothes are so great. Like to watch, like especially like the sweaters and stuff.
I don't remember that.
Just Pacific Northwest, and like all the sets are really interesting to look at and cool. And Agent Dale Cooper, of course, is an all-time great TV character.
It's the best.
I don't think a show like this would ever be classic like that. When you think about like, oh, Agent Dale Cooper, all-time great TV character. From streaming, who do you think would be like an all-time great character? Certainly from this, it would only be Walton Goggins, but this is not his best performance by a long shot on TV.
Right. So, sorry, you're saying from like, let's say the last 5 years, what's been streaming that has a really iconic and timeless protagonist?
Because we were talking about if there had been any iconic horror baddies in the last few years. And I think maybe Art the Clown.
Who? Is that Terrifier?
Yeah, Terrifier.
I still haven't seen it.
I don't know. We should
wait, listen, sorry. Is there an ice cream truck?
I don't know.
Do you hear that?
I do.
It sounds like there's an ice cream truck. Or someone bang a An oboe downstairs?
Maybe.
I'm sorry I interrupted. That was very confusing.
Yeah. But it seems like network TV shows can really like crank out like a character that you're like a character of its time and plays like an Urkel or whatever. But I'm trying to think of from streaming services if there's anything like that.
What's the Nazi woman from The Boys? You know, the fact that I can't even think of her name actually erases her from the list.
It's a great character.
It's a great character.
Like there's a lot of, maybe Homelander, but hardly anybody saw The Boys, like just based on like, there's a lot of Homelander memes, you see him pop up quite a bit. I think that like in the way that I think of like the success of a horror movie is based on like the number of people dressed as a slutty version of it for Halloween.
Yeah.
I think for a TV show, it's the number of memes based on it.
Yeah.
Like The Office is clearly ruling the internet.
Yeah.
Parks and Rec, a lot of Parks and Rec.
Friends.
A lot of Friends. But not as many as you would think. Not as many memes.
Oh, yeah. So here's something that's interesting that I discovered. And just because I read a few articles doesn't mean it's a real thing, of course. Mm-hmm. But so people upload their old VHS and high-8 tapes to the internet, right? Mm-hmm. And I guess there's been this thing where people are uploading their video tapes of when they were in high school. So not just home movies, but like kids at high school with their little camcorders recording each other in the 90s and uploading them. And of course, people who were that age at that time are all nostalgic. Mm-hmm. But it's actually Gen Z kids that are obsessing on them. Oh, because it's all of these kids interacting with one another. And it's so funny. I watched some of them a little bit. I skimmed it. It's super fucking boring for me. But some guy will be walking around his high school with a video camera and people are like, no, don't point that at me. As opposed to today, where if someone lifts up their phone, people just immediately start doing duck face.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody's looking at devices. Everybody just looks kind of awkwardly at ease or at ease in their awkwardness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had a camcorder when I was like early 90s. Like my dad had like one of the ones that where you like put it over your shoulder and you had the VHS hanging off your side.
Oh yeah.
Like an old one.
Yeah.
And I shot a lot of footage.
Yeah.
And then my mom has most of it. And so it's like me and my friends like making movies and trying to imitate the Fat Boys and all kinds of stuff.
So good.
And my nephew fucking loves it. Like he's watched like all of it like for hours.
Did you digitize them all?
A lot of them have been digitized. Good. Yeah. And it's just weird to like, I went over there one time when I went back home to visit, he was just like, let's watch these. I'm like, man, I don't want to watch these. But like, it's just, there's just a Christmas, that I'm filming and just like, we're having all this commentary and it's like, you see my mom horribly hungover on the couch and like, just with like adult eyes, you really see what's going on. You see like, my cousin that became a juggalo and would later die of drugs, like he's like smashing his head against the wall and like just eating wrapping paper in the background. And you're like, okay, his life makes a lot more sense now.
Wow, yeah. Oh my God.
It's some real gummo shit, but you met my mom.
Yes, I did. What a fucking delight. And I know when people say that, it gives you a little pain, but
no, I get it. Like, I get it. Like, part of me sometimes is like, man, I should just go down there and film them and, make that Tiger King money.
Yes.
I think a lot of people like are like, oh, my dad's so crazy. And like, you're like, it'd be a great show about him. Like people say that,
Yeah.
I mean, they are like legitimate weirdos.
Yeah. Your mom and her sister it's next level.
Yeah. It's pretty like whatever their existence is far more interesting than anything we've ever talked about on this show.
Completely. Yeah. Fallout. I don't know, maybe we're done.
Yeah, probably done with Fallout. Would you watch the second season?
Oh, 100%. I was super into it. And I'd imagine I'll rewatch the first season again at some point after.
It's okay the second way through. Like it has like
I just need to forget it a little. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'll go back to it probably in a year or something, or
Yeah.
maybe just before season 2 comes out, because it was fun.
Yeah,
you know?
watching it through, the character Lucy is really a delight.
Yeah.
Like you almost like her more the second time through watching it. And then I really like the Cooper sad cowboy stuff. I really liked quite a bit more.
Which one? I'm sorry.
The ghoul as the Cooper, his just the decline into just obscurity. Like the whole idea of him like working the kids' party seems really like super sad. You're like, oh, is that where like Jake Cahill was headed? And
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to thank our listeners for letting us do another not necessarily horror ramblesode. Yeah. You gonna watch All of Us Strangers?
You've mentioned it several times, but I
want to do that next so badly.
I mean, I'll watch whatever.
Okay.
If I must.
Is that it?
That's it. That's all I got to say about Fallout.
All right. Well, thanks for listening.
I never cough at all, except for with vape cartridges. I don't know what it is, but I'll start sneezing and my eyes will start watering. It never happens with normal weed.
This episode is going to start with like a sweet leaf.